Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Grüns is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Grüns.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Welcome back to the Viking Update Show. Man, do we have stuff to talk about, and we have the right people to talk about it with. And this is the Viking Update Show, part of TalkNorth.com. One of our, we have a handful of football shows. One of them is the Alec Lewis Show, which I highly recommend. Alec does a great job covering the team for The Athletic and doing podcasts for TalkNorth.com. This is TalkNorth.com. When you find a show you like, please subscribe to your favorite podcast app. We just finished recording this week's John Krawczynski Show, which is also on YouTube, one of our more popular shows, where the Viking Update Show is presented to you by OnX Hunt, and we're coming to you from the Aquarius Home Surfaces Studio. Gentlemen, let's get to it. Alec, you've been right in the middle of it, and I want all of us to chime in on this because we all know Rob Brzezinski. We all know that that having an interim general manager run your draft is borderline crazy, and yet it might have worked out. Alec, starting with you, just what the heck's going on with that position? Where are we headed with that position? And how did it work out with Rob actually running the draft?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, Jim. Like in the aftermath of the draft, I talked to probably, 5 to 7 people at all layers of the organization, and everyone was pretty happy, it sounded like, with how things played out in the draft. I mean, I think they went in with a pretty clear plan. They wanted to have in-person touch points with almost every player they drafted. They really didn't, there wasn't much deception where most of the guys they took, they brought in on 30 visits. That was reported. So it was pretty easy to identify guys that they liked. And then while there were some machinations of the board and how things played out in the draft, I do think they were pretty happy with a lot of the picks. Now, obviously, when you look at the picks, there was a lot of coaching influence on them, beginning at number 18 in the first round with Caleb Banks. I mean, Brian Flores, that has Brian Flores fingerprints written all over it as far as that first pick. And then I expect now that the draft is over, that the GM search is, well underway. There's a lot of, I'd say, in the industry right now, everybody is curious. I mean, there have been a lot of texts this week of, what are you hearing? What is going on? Who are they identifying? Is this Rob's job to keep? And there's a lot of murkiness around all that. Who's leading the search? Is it Andrew Miller who led the search that ended up being Kwesi Adofo-Mensah? How much say does Kevin O'Connell have? Is there a search firm involved? I mean, these are the questions that are floating around, I would say, the NFL right now. So the next week or so and how that proceeds is going to be very interesting to me.
It's going to be really awkward when we find out that Rob Brzezinski is leading the search firm. Which is a possibility.
I am not, I don't believe that he is the one, absolutely in charge of this whole thing. But I still think, there is the outstanding question of how much does Rob Brzezinski really want this job? Like, from all indications I've gotten is, even behind the scenes, he hasn't really declared one way or another. And I don't know what the upside is. And John probably has a thought on this. Like, I don't know what the upside would be for him to do that. But it's going to be interesting if they bring in a new GM, with Rob having just operated the last few months the way he has, and with as much internal support for Rob as there is, like, what is the process then of, does he just go back into that same role? Would they think about going president of football operations and having an evaluator underneath him as the GM? There are, we could talk about this for a whole podcast because of the iterations that exist, I think.
Yeah, it's totally wild to see how this is all playing out, for sure. And to your point, Alec, it's right. Like, Rob is in a difficult position. If, let's say that Rob's main goal right now is he wants to stay with the Vikings for the foreseeable future. He doesn't want to retire. He doesn't want to move to somewhere else. So if he declares, I want this job, and they end up going with someone else, guess what one of the first moves of the new guy coming in is yeah, that guy that wanted the job, maybe we don't want to keep him around for a whole lot longer. But, at the same time, if there is one person that I know in this crazy professional sports, ego-driven world who could want the job, not get the job, and still stay and be a very valuable member of a football operations department, Rob Brzezinski's that guy. Like, I just don't think that he would be a politic or behind the scenes, an undercutter of a new person coming in or anything like that. So I think he would be honorable in, kind of fulfilling whatever duties he is asked to fulfill, because he's done that forever. But if you declare it and it doesn't work, like that could be problematic going forward. So it's a weird situation that I don't know how it's going to play out. And if Rob ends up getting the job, then that's probably the cleanest way to go forward. But is that the best way? I don't know. But this is the whole structure of this, or the whole process of this, is just kind of throwing all sorts of landmines every which way around the facility. And now you're just like stepping gingerly to make sure you don't hit one.
Well, and I'll say this too, and Jim, you probably have thoughts on it, but just real quick, like, I've had conversations where it's like, okay, if you bring someone new in right now, then we got to, what happens to the scouts? What happens to the scouting department? What happens to the grading scale? Are we changing all that? How can we get that cemented for the next college season, which begins really soon? So I don't know if someone asked me yesterday, like, does this usually happen? I'm like, I don't believe it does, even though I haven't covered the NFL forever. So it's something.
I think the Vikings are kind of unique in that I really do think there are people in the organization who are never going anywhere, who never want to go anywhere, who are not climbers, who wouldn't take a promotion with another franchise. And I always thought of Paul Wiggins that way. I always thought of Frank Gilliam and Jerry Reichow that way. They were never going to work for anybody else, no matter what they were offered. I think Scott Studwell was that way, is that way. Jeff Anderson, who kind of runs their media and PR and all that stuff, I can't imagine him ever working for anybody else. There are people in that organization I just think are Vikings people, period. And I think Rob Brzezinski is a Viking person, period. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was playing this in such a way that if he got the general manager job, it would be a bonus and something he didn't lobby for. It would be something they just thrust upon him and he accepted, so that he isn't a threat to anybody else who would come in, and he hadn't declared himself as somebody with that ambition, because I think he would be fine with going back to what he did before. Maybe they tweak his title or give him a raise. I just don't see him leaving.
Yeah, I mean, and what I would say is, like, I mean, for him to have shepherded this thing over the last 4 months, like, the Vikings are pretty fortunate that you have somebody like him in the building to be able to get this ship from where it was in late January to where it is now. Like, that's just, you're not going to find many people who are going to have the tact to be able to work with these specific coaches, this scouting staff, maneuver this cap situation. It has not been the easiest of roads, and to try to maintain belief from people inside the building. And so, I mean, they have made some hard decisions. They've done a lot of, I would say, moving and shaking with the roster. And so it can't be taken for granted the job he's done in this period. But I think people who bring up, well, does this organization need a new voice? Does there need to be like evolution in terms of how things are operating behind the scenes from a scouting perspective? Like, I can understand those perspectives. I guess those conversations lead me back down the road of these coaches have garnered a lot of sway over the last 3 years. And so the question that I have is, if you're bringing somebody in from the outside, what happens as that person tries to integrate their own philosophy with these coaches who have the level of sway that they have? And can you find somebody with a level of feel that can work within that? I don't know the answer to that question. That's why there are people who get paid a lot more than I do to try to come up with that answer, for sure.
It's such a mess in terms of the way that all of the order of operations usually go. You usually get your GM in, and then you have your coaches set, and then you have your draft, and then all of it aligns. Now, if they go outside of the organization, and if it is not Rob Brzezinski, what that all means is no matter who you bring in, there is going to be a natural inclination to be, hey, this person probably wants their own coach. This person wanted their own draft picks. Are they married to Caleb Banks? Are they married to, look, O'Connell and Flores have done enough, I think, to garner certainly respect within the league. And I think there's going to be a lot of GM candidates who would interview for this position saying, coaching is a strength of this organization. Yeah. I want to keep that going. But it is like, it's going to be delicate to incorporate someone, who has no ties to any players or coaches in this building and say, all right, everyone play nice together. Like, maybe it works out. It's possible that it would work out, but it will require a level of sort of sacrifice and a lack of ego that is uncommon in the NFL. And so, buckle up. We'll see. It's
possible that it would work out. Is my takeaway.
That's a great theme for like next season. It's possible that it will work out. Vikings fans, get ready.
And it very well might.
Like, it will. It could.
That's the thing. It's crazy.
Yes, it very well could. Absolutely.
Let's get to the actual draft here. Now that we've confused ourselves over what should happen and what is happening, let's get the actual players that they drafted. But first, I want to remind you that the Viking Update Show is presented to you by Onyx Hunt and Onyx Fish. Stop fishing the same lake because it's the only one you know. Onyx Fish lets you filter lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potential, so you can make a smarter call on where to spend your Saturday before you ever hitch up the trailer. It's $34.99 for the year, less than a spool of good braid. Download Onyx Fish on the App Store or go to onyxmaps.com/fish and fish smarter this season. We also want to thank Aquarius Home Services.
The Aquarius Home Services in Connecticut Customer Appreciation Open House is happening May 1st through 3rd. Score up to 30% off Connecticut water systems, water filters 20% off, heating and cooling systems up to 30% off. Plus, huge savings on generators, water heaters, and more. Don't forget to bring a water sample for a free analysis. It's food, fun, and savings May 1st through 3rd in Little Canada at 694 and 35E. Details at aquariushomeservices.com.
And here's John Krawczynski for True Vision Institute.
True Vision Institute in Bloomington is the place to go for your vision correction needs. Go to truevision.com, set up a free consultation, go on into the folks at True Vision and just enjoy the hospitality and enjoy the education that you get in terms of the options that you have for vision correction. I had LASIK surgery at True Vision almost 2 years ago. It was an incredible experience. They bring you in. You're in and out of there very quickly, and within hours, you're seeing as clearly as I've ever seen. I have no need for the hassles of glasses and contacts anymore, and just life is smoother, life is easier since I went to True Vision. So go to truevision.com and set up your consultation, and then go through the motions. And by the end of it, when you come out of there, you will be saying, I should have done this 10 years ago, just like I did. True Vision, truevision.com.
All right, so let's get to the players. I found I had an interesting draft day experience because I was just watching on TV, and I saw Nick Saban in the afternoon on ESPN start raving about this guy who had a foot injury at Florida who destroyed offensive lines whenever he was healthy, and then the Vikings ended up drafting that guy. Enormous talent. How do you assess the level of risk attached to Caleb Banks, Alec?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a major risk. Like there were people who in the league, it's like, all right, you're either hitting a home run and hitting the walk off, or it's a strikeout and you're headed back to the dugout and getting ready for the next day. Like I think that's how a lot of people in the league viewed what who Caleb Banks is and can be. The tape is, I mean, when he is healthy and he is active, I mean, you just can't find many guys walking the earth who are 6'6", 325 pounds with 36-inch arm length and the amount of lateral quickness that he has. I sound like Mel Kiper right now, but legitimately, when you watch the tape, there just aren't that many guys like this. And the Vikings certainly have not had a guy like this in recent years. And so I can totally understand in a draft where specifically at the top, there were not there were probably 12 players who were considered blue chip caliber players. And then there were guys like a Caleb Banks who have the potential to be that, but have the medical flag that he had that are probably worth, rolling the dice on. And that's what the Vikings ended up doing. And I mean, in many ways, I give them credit for going out on the limb and trying to make it happen. But this is now a huge bet on the organization's ability to evaluate medically, on the organization's ability to maximize what a guy can be. So that's really like all of the I would say you can see the vision, but it is now going to take the organization to maximize a guy that is going to matter heavily in terms of how this, what this thing looks like in the years to come.
Hey, Alec, do you think there was any possibility for trading down in terms of like the evaluation of where he was going to go, the concern about his injury, and could they have gotten back 10 spots, 15, 20 spots and picked up something? Or was it just like, no, there's going to be a team that picks him if not too far if we don't grab him here?
Yeah, I would say that definitely before the draft, the Vikings had a lot of conversations with teams picking in the 20s to line up, as teams always do. Like, okay, if we get to this spot and we think this is possible, here's the deal from a pick standpoint that we would probably do. There was a ton of that with teams in the 20s, I know, in the lead up to the draft. I think once the Vikings got on the clock at 18, there was less activity than maybe they would have thought there could be. And there was also, I think some worry that if they do move back, let's just say 11 spots to the Kansas City Chiefs at 29, the Chiefs ended up taking an interior defensive lineman, Peter Woods. Would they have been interested in moving up to snag the guy that the Vikings believe was the best interior defensive lineman? So it was the fact they didn't trade back was a combination of worrying, I think, that they wouldn't be able to get their guy, and the fact that teams were not dying to move up. In the pre-draft, there was a lot of expectation there would be tackles available in that spot. There were less of them available at 18 than teams expected, so that affected some of the potential movement, if that makes sense.
This is reminding me of a piece. John will know this guy. A guy named Bob McGinn was just a dominant NFL writer, Packer writer for a long time. And he was one of those guys who had all the scouts on speed dial and spent all of his time talking football, inside football with assistant general managers and scouts. And he just really knew his stuff. I still remember going to the famous Randy Moss debut at Lambeau Field in '98 game in the rain where he just destroyed them. And that morning in the paper, Bob McGinn's prediction column was the Packers have, and Packers had a good defensive backs. He said, Packers have nobody who's tall enough or fast enough to stay with Randy Moss. He's going to destroy him tonight. He was that kind of an insider. And I remember he did a piece once. It was a huge research piece. And basically his premise came down to this. There just aren't that many players that really move the needle. There aren't many players that you can build around that can make everybody around them better, that win championships. So you always got to go for the elite player, because you always fill in with pretty good players. You can find pretty good players later in the draft, find pretty good players in free agency. You might even, get a pretty good player who's undrafted. If you got to get your hands on the elite players. If Caleb Banks has a chance to be an elite player and you got him with the 18th pick, you almost had to do it.
Yeah, there's no question, Joe. Like, again, I mean, I had a conversation with Billy Napier, who was the coach at Florida. Now he's at James Madison, and he observed like Caleb Banks' entire arc essentially. And he's like, I mean, I'm not going to lie. In the last 10 to 20 years, there just aren't guys at this size and stature who move like him. Now, again, there is a lot that this Vikings team is going to have to maximize. The health is foremost and number one by far. And it just sounds like the Vikings believe strongly in the medical expertise they had, evaluate the situation. We'll see over time if that confidence within that evaluation pays dividends or not. And then they have they have enough faith in Brian Flores to have extended him and paid him the money that he was ultimately paid. And they have a lot. Kevin O'Connell loves their new defensive line coach, Ryan Nielsen. He's loved him for a long time. He was in the mix for the defensive coordinator job in 2023. And so I think for them, knowing that guy is going to be hands-on every single day with that position group, you feel comfortable with that. Now, I'll say this, and this is kind of a segue. They took a guy in the 3rd round, Dominique Orange, Big Citrus, one of the best nicknames I've ever heard. And that is another, like, you're stepping out on a limb with that guy to be able to maximize his development. So they have really bet a lot that they can get the best out of guys in that room. And I do think that will be a pivotal bet to look back on 3 years from now in terms of where this team ultimately is.
Yeah. And to me, like, if Caleb Banks does not work out as a player, just as a skills, talent, makeup, all of that, and it doesn't work out, that's one thing. And I think that can be sort of absorbed and you just chalk it up to, hey, that happens. You know, you're going to take players, they're not going to work out. You want to reduce those as many as possible, especially with your 1st round picks, but it does happen. To me, the one way that this really goes sideways for them is if the medical thing happens. If he's in training camp and that foot flares up and he cannot play, and that is where you look at it as like, look, this was a real problem coming into the draft. Everyone knew about it. And you guys looked at that and said, no, we can work with it and it'll be fine. And it wasn't fine. That's the kind of thing that makes it like, this was a clear red flag. You guys misinterpreted it. And now we're, chasing our tails on it. So, to me, like, as long as they are correct in that this foot issue that he has had with a super big guy who, like, foot issues for really big dudes is really common. If they can get that under control and if they can keep him healthy, then you just let it play out and see what happens with it. But yeah, if those foot issues are chronic and he's just not able to stay on the field at all, then there's going to be some really hard questions that people have to answer there.
We're talking here on Wednesday morning. Apparently Jennings from the 49ers, free agent wide receiver, is visiting the Vikings. I mean, the Vikings do have cap space. By the time you hear this, maybe there will be some resolution on this, but I'm fascinated by the potential move. Alec, what do you think of that as a potential 3rd receiver or 2B receiver, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jawan Jennings at his best, being like the most, when he is committed as a run blocker, when he is all the way in, when he's healthy, this guy pairing him with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison would be pretty freaking entertaining to watch because of the multiple skill set that he provides. I will be interested to see over the course of the next couple days how much of this visit is just kind of a feeling out process, gauging the money, versus, the Vikings want to make this happen right now. I mean, Jawan Jennings, he's been really productive over the last couple of years as a pass catcher in San Francisco. I think he wants to be paid like a number 2 type receiver. How much is he willing to work with the team? How much is Drew Rosenhaus, who also represented Jonathan Grenard, willing to work with the team given where things are? It's a fascinating kind of situation. But and I've said this in recent weeks, but if they were to bring in Jawan Jennings and then you squint and it's like Kyler Murray healthy, Damon Claiborne with that explosiveness, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Juwan Jennings. I mean, you can start to get to a place where you feel pretty excited about what's possible. That is obviously all on paper and you're playing Madden at that point, but you could understand why the Vikings would be interested in a guy like this with his skill set.
Yeah, I saw someone put on social media, like, if they were to get Jennings, the Vikings would have the best number 1 receiver in the NFL, the best number 2, and the best number 3. And now, I mean, Addison over T. Higgins and a few of the others, maybe not. Let's just slow down just a little bit. But certainly the idea of depth at that position with a quarterback who likes to run around and create down the field for guys is enticing. And especially when they went through the entire draft and didn't pick a receiver. So you have to think that in the back of their minds, they believed that this was a real possibility to add someone like Juwan Jennings, if not Juwan Jennings specifically. And adding a veteran dude who has been in it, who has played at a high level on really good teams, played with physicality, doing all of those things, I don't see how you could, draw it up any better than getting that. And yeah, then you look at coming into this training camp and this season with some stocked offensive skill position, with what you did in the draft defensively, kind of leaning more on that end or on that side of the ball. Then you definitely can see some reasons for excitement, even if you're sort of, I guess, banking on real draft help that these guys are going to work out, and it's not going to be a completely bust kind of a draft like we've seen in the last couple of years.
2 more topics. The first, Jonathan Grenard. Final thoughts on that deal, Alec?
Yeah, that was this one it was an interesting one. I'd say over the course of my, whatever it's been now, 4 years covering this team, it was definitely one of the most, I don't like using the word unique, but it was definitely a unique one where you have a guy who the Vikings really bet on in 2024 by signing him to the contract that they did. Then he really performs in 2024. In 2025, the sack production dipped and he got hurt. And then he comes out of that season and he and his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, they want a new deal because he feels like he's underpaid for what the value is for an elite edge rusher. And then if you're the Vikings, you have this cap situation that you're trying to work through. You've got Dallas Turner kind of waiting in the wings. What do? Do you drag it on all the way through the summer and the fall and see if you can ultimately find a resolution? Or do you part with him now, which gives you some cap space and flexibility for the future? They obviously chose that second route. I think the return is arguable, whether you're talking, when you're talking 2 third-round picks, you could spin it one way or another. Rashawn Gary only netted the Packers a 4th. Dexter Lawrence just got the number 10 pick for the Cincinnati, for the New York Giants in the trade with the Cincinnati Bengals. So, definitely an interesting one. I think ultimately the Vikings made the move believing that it would be best for them in the long haul, but there's no question that it is a major hit for a defense that he has been a crucial part of.
Man, I just hate having to trade players that young or that in their prime who have been that productive, who are thought of as well as he was in that locker room. And of course, a lot of this I think was about sort of all of the other things that have happened over the past couple of years with the salary cap, with just kind of having to manage and make hard decisions now. I do wish they could have gotten a little bit more for him, and really tried to maximize, because if you're getting off of an edge rusher with his skill set and his age, I would have liked to see a second or something like that, right?
And I'll say this, the bet that they are making on this current defensive line, you're talking Dallas Turner, who's never done it for a full year. You're talking Jalen Redmond, who has been really good, probably, extremely reliable, but has had health stuff in the past. You just hope that doesn't crop up. Dominique Orange is a major bet from a consistency standpoint at nose tackle. Caleb Banks is a major bet from a foot situation. Andrew Van Ginkel missed a bunch of games last year with a neck injury. So, I mean, if all these guys are healthy and optimizing who they are, it could look really great. If they're not healthy, then you could have a defensive line that's Dallas Turner, Bo Richter, Levi Drake Rodriguez, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, and then you're relying wholeheartedly on Brian Flores' smoke and mirrors. So, I mean, I can understand in many ways, but I can also see in week 9, if it's like, you know, the defensive line is getting washed out. How did this happen? I can go back to this podcast and probably pull up me rambling just like I did for a minute.
Well, yeah. And like, it is like, it's so obvious, but it needs to be stated. Like now, Dallas Turner, man, it's you gotta go. Like there is no safety blanket. There is no net underneath you walking that tightrope. You better kick it into gear. And we did see, like, down the stretch, I was really encouraged, like, watching Dallas Turner. It looked like he was showing up more. Spoke to him at the last game. He talked about, you know, kind of the process of figuring this whole Brian Flores system out and what he's going to need to do in the off season to get ready. But this is absolutely, I'm sure the conversations that Flores and O'Connell and everyone have had with Dallas Turner is, look, kid, like, you're going and you're playing. Like, there's no more 15 snaps, you know, games and things like that. You're going to get out there. So be ready. And they need him to find a consistent level that is really high, because he's all of a sudden maybe the most reliable guy to, you know, that he's going to be there, you know, barring some freak injury. Like, you know that he's there. All the other guys, you have no idea. And so go get him, kid. We'll see.
Last topic. Good stuff, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Did they actually find their starting center with the 7th round pick?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I'll say Gavin Gerhardt, the Cincinnati player that they drafted in the 7th round, really intelligent, really smart. It just sounds like it's all going to come down to, you know, athletically, can he do it at this level? And if he can, then maybe. But I'd say in the short term, it's going to be my expectation that Blake Brandel is going to be in line for that spot. And then, I mean, you're going to be relying heavily on him to solidify the interior of the pocket, which is a lot to rely on. I will say this, just so, you know, people, I think if people are like, then why didn't they draft a center? There was definitely conversations earlier at some point in the draft of, do we pull the trigger on this guy? Would we be better off doing that versus defense? They ended up going the route that they did with a lot of those earlier picks. But, you know, and I keep using the word if, which doesn't ever make me feel comfortable. But if Christian Darrisaw is healthy, if Brian O'Neill's healthy, if the guards are healthy and engaged, as you would expect them to be, then having Blake Brandel as center, you can probably be okay with that. But again, the more ifs you use, used to always, when I'm covering a baseball team, the lineup, the more ifs I have, the more uncomfortable I really feel. So there's a lot of ifs.
It's April and we have all these ifs. Like that doesn't feel great, I will say. Like, you know, there's plenty of months to happen for everyone to heal up and get good and get going. But yeah, it feels a little tenuous right now, which is a little nerve-wracking.
Well, I don't know why you guys can't be more like me and just foresee a 17-0 finish and everything's going to go perfectly.
But you know, you guys are sunshine and rainbows in Souhan land. Yep.
You guys are awful negative, and it's something you need to work on. Okay, you can see somebody about that. Good stuff. I appreciate it. Great. We'll come back next week, and I'll find something to complain about. I promise you. But it just is nuts. It's just fascinating stuff. You know, we're gonna have a lot to talk about this.
I mean, I've learned any. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Joe.
No,
I mean, over the course of 4 years covering this team, Like the one thing that I'm never bored really, which I appreciate, but I don't know if that matters to anybody else. So it will be fascinating to see how this thing goes. And there is a world, for those who are, want to be optimistic, there is a world where these ifs do go right. And this is a 13-14 win team again. Like I'm not going to be surprised by that either, but it'll be entertaining as they do it one way or another.
No doubt. Good stuff, guys. I appreciate it. We'll have Alec on periodically on this show. Often it is myself and John Krawczynski giving the old school view of the Vikings. Also check out Jeff Diamond's Vikings and NFL Insider. And please check out Alec's show, which is fantastic and which he does a lot of. So we'll talk to you soon.